G'day, Sebastian Vettel is leaving us. Next year, there will be no number 5 on the grid. I'm sad, and I'll tell you why in 8 seconds' time. On Thursday, July 28th, 2022, Sebastian Vettel announced he'd be retiring from Formula 1. It was day one of the Hungarian GP, and the F1 world was shocked to hear the news. Of course, it had to come one day. After all, he is 35 years of age, but not the oldest driver on the 2022 grid. 2 are older than him. But for Seb, he'd had enough, and after 16 years in the top level of motorsport, he let us know he'd be finishing up in Abu Dhabi at the end of the 2022 season. What am I going to miss when Seb's not racing anymore? Him rushing around the paddock and through pit lane. I catch him running to drivers' briefings on Friday nights, running to media commitments in the paddock, running late for the national anthem on the grid prior to races. He's always running about. He's been running since the 2007 US GP, where he had his first race in Formula 1, driving for BMW Sauber. 4 races later, he was over at Toro Rosso for a season and a half. That was a very young Sebastian Vettel. Today, he's a true gentleman, an inspiration to many. Over the years, he's mellowed, and this year we've seen him champion numerous causes. In Baku, Britta gave me the heads up about his t-shirt that he was wearing on one of the mornings. I missed him riding into the track, but then I went and shot him at a team appearance with fans where he has to wear team kit. But afterwards I said, could you pop that shirt back on just for a shot? And he was more than happy to do so. And over the past couple of years, he's not been frightened about ruffling a few feathers in his support of the LGBTQ community. His shoes and his bike carry the rainbow emblem. Some don't like it, but many are in favour of it. Seb's married, he has 3 children, his wife Hannah. I've never seen her at the track, never seen his kids at the track either. In fact, last year at end of season testing in Abu Dhabi, it was the first day and he was driving on the second, and he came in late in the day. And he said, Kim, I've got a favour to ask. I said, fine, what can I do for you? And he said, I've got my kids coming in tomorrow. And I said, do you want me to babysit them? He said, no. And I said, would you want some photos of them? He said, no, the opposite. I don't want any photos of them. I said, fine. As it turns out, I wasn't even shooting on day 2, but I was more than happy to do that for him. And I'm pretty sure if he asked that of any photographer in the paddock, they'd all oblige. And his regard and care for the environment is legendary. And when it comes to the environment, he doesn't just pay it lip service. He gets out there and gets his hands dirty. Go back to Silverstone last year. Celia Ruhl, a German journalist, said to me, you might want to come out here. This was after the race. And I popped my head out the window and she says, see over there? And there's a couple of people picking up rubbish in the stand. I said, yeah, that's Seb. So I grabbed a long lens and from my side of the track, shooting across into the grandstand, I spent about 20 minutes shooting Sebastian, his manager, Britta Ruska, and his trainer, Antti Konsas, along with a handful of other supporters, picking up rubbish in the grandstand. And this wasn't a publicity stunt. If it was, there would have been 50 photographers and TV crew. As it was, there was just an Aston Martin video guy and me, uninvited, on the other side of the track. I was thrilled to be able to capture these images, and they ran on my Instagram post, which was, for that year, easily the biggest post. He'll be long remembered for his 4 consecutive World Drivers' Championships, and in 2013 he strung together 9 consecutive wins. That's a fair effort. It was a glorious 6 years at Red Bull, although his multi-21 clash with Mark Webber will long be remembered. I've only known Seb since 2017. This was one of the first pictures I took of the German going back to Australia of that year, and I've been nothing but impressed with him. I often catch him talking to old Red Bull team members, and at length in the paddock. People like Cengiz, who do a lot of running around in a car for people at Red Bull. Nigel Hope, influential in the team and the garage for many years. And he's one of the many drivers that will stop and chat with other people in the paddock for minutes. Most of the other drivers don't invest that length of time talking to people, which is, for a photographer, fantastic for us because we'll get ample opportunity to shoot them. Often, photographers will leave long before Seb finishes up his chats. His father, Norbert, obviously a big supporter, and I see Norbert at a number of races, although I've never seen his mum, Heike, and I've only seen his younger brother, Fabian, once, and never his older sisters. In 2015, after he left Red Bull, he landed that coveted seat in Ferrari. But his time there was nowhere near as successful as it was with Red Bull, notching up 2 seconds, a third, a fourth, a fifth, and a 13th. I remember in 2017 in Montreal, I was staying in the same hotel as Seb, and he happened to come out of his room as I was passing going to my room. We said a quick hello, and I didn't know him then, and he certainly didn't recognise me. But later on, I got one of the management to drop up one of my Africa on Safari books to his room. And I think it was a couple of races later, perhaps in Baku, that we walked out of the track together, and he mentioned that he had the book and was appreciative. But Seb always appreciates things that people do for him, and I see that a lot in the paddock. His relationship with Britta Ruska is legendary. He met her back in his Red Bull days and has had her alongside him ever since. I thought Britta ran the show, but she's very definite about the fact that it is Seb who makes all the calls. Seb is not a fashion man like Lewis or some of the younger brigade. He dresses for comfort. He doesn't drive a car to the track these days. Why? Because he's doing his part for the environment. Now, a lot of you are going to say, oh yes, but he flies from race to race and he drives a fast car. Yes, but he's doing something to help. And I think once he gets out of F1, you'll see a far greater focus on that side of his personality, looking out for the environment. And if anything, it makes us all a little bit more aware that we can do things for the environment just by changing our habits. What about his hair? Have a look at this, hey? He looks a bit like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. And the beard, well, it comes and goes. What I have come to discover about Seb is he doesn't use his fame to his advantage. I think it was back in 2017, I gave some prints of this holiday home that I've got here in Lancelot, which is pretty nice. And I said to Auntie, look, if Seb ever wants to come to Australia for a few days prior to the Melbourne GP, he can have my holiday house. And he said, well, okay, well, just give me a rate. And I said, no, you can have it for nothing. And he said, no, Seb doesn't work like that. He'll gladly pay for it if he wants to take it. And it's all of these small things that has led me to becoming quite enamoured with the fella. I think he's very much a great role model for all of us. Back to racing, in 2021 he moved over to Aston Martin, and I think you'd agree it hasn't been the most glorious 18 months, and he's still got half a season to go, and you never can quite tell what will happen. But definitely we will not see a number 5 on the grid next year, and that will be our loss. Did we get an inkling that he might be retiring this year? Yeah, perhaps now in hindsight you look back at, say, this picture here with Seb wearing his underpants over the top of his race suit, having a dig at the FIA over what he felt were silly rules like the checking of the fireproof underwear. I love this shot and I was very lucky to get it. In fact, I can't think there were too many photographers around at that particular time that he was heading to the garage. And was it a sign when he drove Nigel Mansell's old car that he owns at Silverstone this year? Perhaps it was. As I mentioned earlier, I've only known him since 2017. And I remember vividly one day I was sitting in the lounge. It was 2017 after the Chinese Grand Prix. My son had taken a picture of Seb with Iñaki, his strategist, after the Melbourne GP of 2018. And I showed it to him on the computer and he said, oh, I wouldn't mind getting a copy of that for me and Iñaki. So I ended up at the next race giving him 2 copies and I asked if he'd sign a 3rd for my son. And he did, and of course that's now hanging proudly in Tyler's office. As you may know, Sebastian wasn't at all keen on Instagram for many years. He didn't feel the need to let everybody know what he was doing at every point of the day, so he avoided it. However, on that Thursday of the Hungarian GP, in the morning, I was getting numerous messages from people saying, Seb's now on Instagram. So I put up a post thinking that was the story. Little did I know that an hour later he would put out a press release saying that indeed he was leaving the sport. And then he posted on his Instagram page a brilliant video explaining his reasons why.
I hereby announce my retirement from Formula One by the end of the 2022 season. Probably I should start with a long list of people to thank now, but I feel it is more important to explain the reasons behind my decision.
If you've seen the video, you don't need me to tell you how good it was. I watched it a couple of times and I'm sure if you haven't watched it, you will get great joy from going to his Instagram page and finding it. He's more than a great driver, he's a great man and admired by many. We're going to miss his manager, Britta Ruska. We're going to miss his 2 trainers, Andy Consas and Mark Arnold. Sebastian, thank you for what you've done for the sport, your community and the environment. You will be missed, and come the 20th of November 2022, when you walk out that paddock for the very last time as an F1 driver, there will be great sadness amongst the F1 community. Hats off to you, mate.